It began not with silk, but with failure. In the shadowed halls of the Han imperial court, Emperor Wu of Han paced before a grand map of the known world. His eyes not on the mountains of China, but on the western frontier where whispers spoke of powerful kingdoms and untapped riches. His dreams were grander than gold. He sought immortality, not of body, but of dynasty. But as war raged with the Xiongnu nomads to the north, the emperor's latest campaign had ended in disgrace. A column of soldiers had vanished in the desert, ambushed, outmaneuvered. His enemies mocked him. The court whispered of decline. So he turned west, not with an army, but with a gamble. Into this moment of desperation stepped Zhang Qian, a low-ranking courtier and former prisoner of war. His mission? Infiltrate the lands beyond the mountains, find allies against the Xiongnu, and chart the unknown. But Emperor Wu had another reason for sending him. Rumors of a mystical kingdom far to the west, where horses ran like dragons and metals gleamed like fire. He wanted it for himself. Zhang Qian would not go alone. Hidden among the caravan's guards and traders was a monk named Da Jing, bearing a scroll he claimed was for spiritual protection. And deeper still, in the shadows of the silk bundles, rode a spy, a man with no name, sent by a rival court faction. His orders: sabotage the mission if the emperor's ambition grew dangerous. As they left Chang'an under the veil of twilight, none of them realized what they were truly part of. This was not a diplomatic journey. It was the opening move in a game of empire, religion, and deception that would span centuries. Zhang Qian never returned on schedule. In fact, he shouldn't have returned at all. Years passed after the envoy's departure from Chang'an. The Han court grew restless. Whispers turned to rumors. Had he been killed by the Xiongnu? Or worse, had he defected? The truth was far stranger. Captured early in his mission, Zhang Qian spent over a decade in Xiongnu captivity, forced to serve their chieftains while carefully concealing his knowledge of the Han Empire. But captivity didn't break him. It sharpened him. He learned their language, mapped their terrain in his mind, and even married a Xiongnu woman to survive. But he never forgot his true purpose. When the opportunity came, he escaped, not back to China, but deeper west, across the vast steppes and into the unknown lands of Fergana, where he discovered the fabled heavenly horses Emperor Wu so desperately sought. There in the kingdom of Daiwan, he found not just allies, but rivals, and worse, an empire quietly studying China, eager to exploit the growing road between them. But somewhere along the journey, Zhang Qian changed. Exposure to new cultures, new ideas, and the taste of personal freedom began to blur the lines of loyalty. In Bactria, he met a mysterious woman, a Sogdian translator with a hidden agenda. She spoke of a world without borders, of trade without kings. Her vision intoxicated him. Her connections ran deep. When Zhang Qian finally returned to China, it was not the same man who had left. He brought knowledge, yes, roots, allies, and gifts. But he also brought with him a second allegiance, carefully hidden beneath official reports. He had tasted independence. He had seen empires rise and fall from the edge of a market stall, and he had begun to believe that information was more powerful than any army. The markets of Parthia were a labyrinth of color and sound, a place where every merchant had secrets and every trade could change the course of history. But for Gaius Cassius, a Roman senator, the bazaar was something far more dangerous, a place where information was the true currency and the right whisper could topple empires. Cassius had arrived in Parthia under the guise of a simple envoy, bringing gifts to the Persian king Phraates IV to strengthen ties. But his true mission was darker. A map, crafted in secret by an unknown hand, had found its way into his possession. A map that was not meant to be seen by Roman eyes. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary map, detailing trade routes between the Mediterranean and the East. But beneath the ink, hidden in the margins, was something far more dangerous. A route to the heart of China and the most precious commodity in the world, silk. The map had come to Cassius through a Sogdian merchant, a shadowy figure who whispered of alliances between Rome and the nomads of the steppe. But the merchant's words were veiled in riddles, and Cassius didn't trust the man. He had been handed the map in exchange for a precious Roman relic, a golden laurel wreath, a symbol of Caesar's glory. The merchant's price was steep, but not as steep as what Cassius had to lose. The senator's mind raced. With the Roman Empire on the brink of collapse from internal strife, a route to China could change everything. It could bring wealth, power, and secrets. But as Cassius studied the map in the dim light of a Parthian inn, something felt wrong. He could sense eyes on him, watching, waiting. His every move was now under scrutiny. And when the shadows of Parthia began to stir, he realized the map was not a gift. It was a trap. As Cassius traced the ink with his finger, he felt a strange unease, as if the map itself were alive, pulling him into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The lines weren't just routes. They were redirections, coded pathways meant to deceive and confuse. That night, his suspicions were confirmed. A figure, cloaked in black, slipped into his quarters with a message. The route to China does not lead west. It leads east, and those who follow it will vanish. Cassius was now caught in a game far greater than mere politics. The map was no longer just a tool. It was a warning, and someone was pulling the strings. The Taklamakan Desert was a place of silence, a vast, unforgiving sea of sand where even the boldest of men could be swallowed by time. But for Dajing, a Buddhist monk traveling with Zhang Qian, the desert was a pilgrimage of the soul. His journey was not just across the land but towards something deeper, an inner peace he sought in the very heart of the ancient world. Dajing was no ordinary monk. He carried with him a scroll, small, unassuming, wrapped in fine cloth, but containing the thoughts of an emperor who had long since vanished from the world's memory. The scroll was not holy scripture. It was far more dangerous than that. It contained radical political ideas, revolutionary theories that could dismantle dynasties, provoke uprisings, and change the way entire empires were ruled. He had been entrusted with this sacred burden by a mysterious figure in Chang'an, a scholar who had seen the corruption of the Han dynasty's ruling class and believed the emperor's grip on power was slipping. The scroll, however, was not meant for China alone. Its words were intended for all of Asia. Its teachings could spread like wildfire, stirring the hearts of the oppressed and igniting revolutions from the steppes of Mongolia to the streets of India. But Dajing had secrets of his own. He had been sent to the West not just to spread Buddhism, but to observe, to spy on the foreign powers, to learn from them, and to determine whether the old world could withstand the winds of change. As the caravan traversed the unforgiving desert, the tension between Zhang Qian and Dajing grew. Zhang, ever the pragmatist, was more focused on securing alliances and trade routes than on spirituality. He was a man driven by ambition, while Dajing was a man driven by faith. They were two men from opposite ends of the world, one seeking glory, the other seeking peace. But the scroll that Dajing carried would soon prove to be a dangerous thread. One evening, as the desert sky darkened to reveal 1,000 stars, Dajing opened the scroll by the light of a flickering fire. The ink seemed to shimmer in the dim light, as if the words themselves had come alive. Suddenly, the desert's quiet was broken by a faint noise. A footstep, light yet deliberate. A shadow moved just outside the campfire's reach. Dajing's heart skipped a beat. His eyes locked onto Zhang Qian, who stood watching him from across the camp. There was something in the air, a feeling that the caravan was no longer just traveling west, but towards something far more dangerous. Zhang Qian had suspected for days that Dajing was hiding something, and now he knew it. The monk had crossed a line. He had brought more than just spiritual teachings to the West. He had brought ideas that could change the course of history. The roads of the Silk Road were not just paths for merchants. They were pathways of power, where kingdoms plotted and empires whispered in the shadows. Shirin, a princess of the Sassanid Empire, had long known the weight of her bloodline. Born into a house of warriors, her beauty was matched only by her political cunning. In the markets of Ctesiphon, she played a game with many faces, one of seduction, one of diplomacy, and one of silent rebellion. The Sassanid Empire was at war with the Byzantine Empire, and the Parthian merchants who crossed her lands carried more than just silk, spices, and exotic goods. They were messengers, traders of information, and in some cases, arms dealers. It was these men cloaked in the guise of simple merchants who secretly fueled the growing conflict between East and West. But Shirin was no mere princess. She was the secret architect of the Sassanid Empire's darkest plots. Her relationship with the Parthian arms dealers was far more than transactional. She used them to secure weapons, yes, but she also used them to weave a web of alliances that could destroy her enemies, both within and beyond her own court. Her greatest secret? She had been working with the Han dynasty in a covert operation that reached across the Silk Road. Behind closed doors, the Sassanids and the Chinese had made an unholy pact, one of gold, silk, and war. Shirin herself had become a key figure in a clandestine alliance between the two empires, one that would see the Byzantines crushed under the weight of Chinese steel. But love, it seemed, had a way of complicating even the most carefully laid plans. Enter Rostam, a Parthian general who had long served her family. His loyalty to Shirin was unquestionable, but beneath his loyalty there was something deeper, a fierce, almost impossible love for her. He had seen her manipulate the court with the ease of a seasoned strategist. He had seen her outwit even the most formidable of opponents. But what he hadn't seen was her true nature, that beneath her regal facade, she was willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for the sake of power. When Rostam was sent on a mission to procure weapons from the Chinese, part of the burgeoning alliance between their two great empires, he did not expect to fall into the web of intrigue Shirin had so carefully spun. There, in the shadow of Xianyang, he met a Chinese warlord whose ambitions rivaled his own. And in this warlord, Rostam found something even more dangerous than Shirin's ambitions: betrayal. For the warlord was no ally of China at all. He had been sent by the Byzantines to infiltrate the Sassanid alliance. The silk trade, it turned out, was nothing more than a cover for a plot to manipulate both East and West. Now Rostam stood at a crossroads. Would he continue his devotion to Shirin, who had given him everything? Her love, her trust, her loyalty? Or would he follow the path of truth, exposing her treachery before it destroyed everything? But the hardest part? Rostam wasn't sure whether he loved her enough to betray her or hated her enough to save the empire. The winds of the Tian Shan mountains howled through the narrow passes, carrying with them the stench of death, and the whispers of men who did not know their fate was already sealed. Among the throngs of merchants traveling along the Silk Road, one caravan stood apart. This was not a group of ordinary traders. These men were shadows, hidden beneath the guise of spice merchants, carrying something far more sinister than perfumes or incense. At the head of the caravan was Karim, a man whose history was shrouded in mystery. Born in the heart of the Persian Empire, Karim was a former assassin turned merchant. He had long abandoned the life of violence, or so he thought. But the reach of his past was never far behind, and now it had come calling. The goods Karim and his men carried were indeed exotic. Spices, silks, and rare perfumes, some of the finest ever to travel the road. Yet the true cargo, hidden beneath layers of fine cloth and ornate wooden crates, was far more deadly. Vials of poison so potent that a single drop could kill an entire city. The poison had been manufactured in secret, and its destination was far from innocent. Unknown to most of the caravan, Karim had been paid to deliver a shipment of death to a place few had ever heard of, the far corners of Byzantium. There it would be used to kill key political figures and sow chaos in a kingdom already teetering on the brink of collapse. The men who traveled with Karim were not just merchants. They were agents of a shadowy faction who wanted to see the Byzantine Empire fall, and they would stop at nothing to see their plan fulfilled. Yet as the caravan trekked deeper into the steppes, something strange began to happen. One by one, the men started falling ill, first with a fever, then with strange marks on their skin, and finally with violent convulsions. Karim watched in horror as his men, once sturdy and loyal, now writhed in pain. It was the poison, but not the poison meant for Byzantium. The disease that was sweeping through the caravan was something far more dangerous than anything he had encountered before. It was the plague, an invisible killer that moved swiftly and silently, like a shadow in the night. Its origins were unknown, but its effects were undeniable. Karim's mind raced. He had heard rumors of a plague that had begun spreading along the trade routes, silent and deadly, moving in the wake of caravans like an invisible army. But never had he imagined that his own caravan would become its unwilling vessel. As the plague spread through the ranks, fear gripped the men. The caravan's forward progress slowed to a crawl as the sickened merchants struggled to continue, their bodies ravaged by the unseen illness. Karim knew they couldn't keep moving. Not like this. If they continued, they would spread the disease far and wide, infecting not only the Silk Road, but every city and kingdom in its path. And in the midst of it all, there was the strange realization that the plague had not arrived by accident. Someone had used the caravan as a carrier, sending the disease into the heart of trade routes, where it would move like wildfire, infecting every major trading hub, every merchant, and every kingdom it touched. But the question remained, who was behind it? The desert night was silent, eerily so. In the sea of dunes, stars shimmered like watchful eyes. Beneath them, a single figure moved without sound. Zayd, a man whose name was never spoken aloud in the cities. Assassin, devout killer, ghost of the caliphate. His blades had ended the lives of kings and generals, and now his orders were clear. His target? A humble merchant preaching a new faith, spreading like wildfire among the trade routes of the Silk Road. The merchant's name was Yunus, but among his followers, he was already called the Voice. A former trader turned prophet, Yunus had seen visions, so he claimed, while crossing the Karakum Desert. He spoke of unity, of peace, of a world without the chains of empire or coin. He had gathered a loyal following of converts, merchants, farmers, even former soldiers. He offered no armies, no taxes, no war, only a radical idea that no ruler was higher than the divine and no gold more sacred than truth. This idea was more dangerous than swords. Zayd was sent by a powerful regional emir whose rule depended on loyalty bought with silver and maintained through fear. A new religion that spread through faith instead of force was an existential threat to every throne touched by the Silk Road. But when Zayd finally reached Yunus's camp, something strange happened. He didn't kill him. Not immediately. Yunus, knowing who he was, welcomed Zayd as a guest. He offered him food, water, and rest. And instead of fear, he spoke, openly and calmly, about the emptiness of empire, the illusion of power, and the freedom of belief. Zayd, trained to resist all manipulation, found himself unable to ignore the strange pull of Yunus's words. For the first time, Zayd began to question who he truly served. Each night, as the campfire flickered in the desert wind, Zayd listened. Not just to the teachings, but to the silence between the words, the clarity of conviction, the lack of fear in Yunus's eyes. He saw not a prophet, but a man who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Then came the moment of truth. A second assassin arrived, sent by the same emir, impatient with Zayd's failure. This new killer would finish what Zayd had not. But instead of stepping aside, Zayd made his choice. He turned his blade on his fellow assassin, and when the blood soaked the sand beneath their feet, Zayd knew he was no longer the emir's tool. He was something else now. Not a believer, not yet, but a man no longer blind. The year is 830 CE. Baghdad is a beacon of light in a darkening world. Under the Abbasid Caliphate, the city has become the heart of global knowledge, a sprawling jewel of marble domes, minarets, and markets, where philosophers rub shoulders with spies, and scholars translate every scrap of wisdom they can find from Greek, Sanskrit, Syriac, and now Chinese. At the center of it all stands the House of Wisdom, a grand library and research hub where men of every faith gather in uneasy harmony to decipher the universe. There, Caliph al-Mamun, obsessed with knowledge and the stars, funds the translation of any manuscript that might give the Abbasid Empire an edge in science, medicine, or warfare. And then one day, a new shipment arrives. Delivered quietly through a network of Silk Road traders, the crate is unmarked, save for a jade seal, the symbol of a Tang dynasty official. Inside, 4 scrolls, written in elegant Chinese wrapped in yellow silk. They claim to contain ancient knowledge of gunpowder, compasses, and astronomical calculations far beyond anything the West had yet seen. The scholars of Baghdad are awestruck. Translation begins immediately. The texts are beautiful, poetic, and scientifically revolutionary. calculations for explosive reactions, schematics of directional instruments, charts of the stars with mathematical precision beyond Ptolemy. The news spreads like wildfire. Scholars flock to Baghdad. Foreign leaders send envoys, begging for copies. The Caliph orders the construction of new observatories. A scientific revolution is ignited in the Islamic world. But not all is as it seems. A young scholar named Hafsa, skeptical by nature and fiercely loyal to the truth, begins to notice something strange. The measurements in the scrolls don't match known Chinese scientific formats. The paper, too coarse. The ink, European in origin. And buried in the astronomical charts are symbols she's only seen once before, in manuscripts from Byzantium. Her investigation leads her into the underbelly of Baghdad, secret book traders, black market scribes, and scholars who speak in riddles and vanish by dawn. And then, in the ruined corner of an old Zoroastrian temple, she finds the truth. The manuscripts are forgeries, not just fakes, but masterfully crafted counterintelligence weapons. They were planted in the House of Wisdom by Byzantine agents, seeking to derail Baghdad's progress by injecting false scientific data into its very foundation. If the empire adopted these principles, built compasses off flawed designs, developed weapons that backfired, it would collapse from within, its greatest strength turned into a fatal weakness. But Hafsa is not just a scholar. She is also the daughter of one of the Caliph's most trusted advisors. And when she tries to reveal the truth, she discovers the final twist. The Caliph already knows. The Mongol Empire may have shattered, but its ghost still haunts the Silk Road. In the parched wastes near Karakoram, rumors swirl among traders and treasure hunters. A caravan has vanished, not to bandits or storm, but to something older. Something that whispers through the dunes when the moon is full. 3 grave robbers, once Silk Road guards, now turned relic seekers, follow a half-burnt map purchased in Samarkand. Their destination, a lost tomb marked only by the sigil of the eternal blue sky, the forgotten burial site of a Mongol general said to have died in a cursed battle far from home. The tomb lies beneath a collapsed fortress, swallowed by sand and time. Inside, the air is thick, not just with dust, but a silence too complete. The men descend with torches, gold in their eyes, ignoring the script scratched into the stone above the crypt. He who disturbs the rider disturbs death itself. They find it, a sarcophagus sealed with molten bronze. On it, a mask carved from obsidian, and inside, more than treasure. Yes, there's gold, exquisite bracelets, coins imprinted with the faces of every continent the Mongols ever touched. There are scrolls wrapped in silk, stamped with the mark of Kublai Khan, a sword that hums in the air, still sharp after centuries. But beneath the body's ribs lies a sealed urn, cracked with age, humming softly with pressure. When one of them opens it, they fall screaming, not from poison, not from a trap, but from something far worse. Airborne spores, dust-like, weightless, almost invisible. Within days, one man is dead, another has vanished. The last question mark. He reaches a Silk Road outpost, coughing blood, hallucinating voices speaking in Old Mongolic. His last words, recorded by a traveling physician from Venice, "The empire rides again, in the breath." In the shimmering crossroads city of Samarkand, nestled like a jeweled dagger between mountains and desert, trade flows like blood through veins. It is the beating heart of the Silk Road, where Sogdian merchants haggle in 20 languages. Persian nobles count gold by candlelight, and whispers travel faster than caravans. And ruling over it all, Lady Anahita, the merchant queen. Neither royal by blood nor wife of a king, Anahita rose from obscurity to command the city's caravanserais with elegance and ruthlessness. Born the daughter of a minor textile dealer, she was once sold into servitude. But she learned quickly how to listen, how to promise, how to betray. She now commands a private army, a shadow fleet, and an invisible court of spies stitched across the Silk Road. To the empires of East and West, she is a trusted broker of peace. To merchants, a goddess of prosperity. To rulers, a necessary evil. But Anahita is far more than a middlewoman. She is an architect of empires. She orchestrates famine, by halting grain in Bactria. She overthrows a Persian governor by leaking falsified letters. She arms rebels in the Levant by trading silk for iron, and always her involvement vanishes like smoke. No signature, no witness, only silk dyed in shades no other weaver can reproduce. Yet her greatest game is just beginning. She receives a visitor, a plague-weakened survivor from a ruined Mongol tomb. He dies in her audience chamber, bleeding from the eyes, but not before whispering a prophecy and handing her a fragment of gold-inscribed bone. Rather than fear, Anahita smiles. She has known of the Mongol crypts for years. She's paid scholars to locate them, grave robbers to probe them, and physicians to study their contents. She's not terrified of the disease. She's weaponizing it. Across the Silk Road, her agents begin shifting the flow of caravans, guiding them not away from plague zones, but through them. She sells medicine that doesn't work. She funds quarantine outposts that are in fact distribution hubs, where once she ruled trade routes, now she controls contagion paths. Empires begin to sicken, and that's when she makes her move. A coalition of 3 empires, Tang loyalists in the east, weakened Sassanid remnants in the west, and a rebellious faction in Delhi, secretly fall under her financial control. Their rulers are mere puppets, their wars planned, their treaties written in her hand. The year is 230 CE. Rome is bleeding. The frontiers buckle under pressure from the Sassanids in the east and Germanic tribes in the north. Meanwhile, deep in the Chinese interior, the once mighty Han dynasty has crumbled into fragments. Warlords carve up the empire like scavengers feasting on a corpse, and yet in the chaos, a deal is born in secret. Brokers from Samarkand whisper to both sides of a dream, an alliance between 2 giants, Rome and a Chinese warlord, united to crush Persia and take control of the Central Silk Road. If successful, they would control the flow of trade, ideas, and power across 3 continents. But the dream is an illusion woven in silk. The Roman general Tiberius Varro, a proud but desperate man, agrees to meet his Chinese counterpart under cover of a trade delegation. In an opium-fragranced tent pitched in the shadow of the Hindu Kush, the 2 leaders clasp hands over bolts of white silk stained with blood, a symbolic pact sealed with fabric and sacrifice. Unbeknownst to either, the silk bears coded threads, a Sogdian cipher only one woman knows how to read. Anahita, the merchant queen, has orchestrated the meeting. It was her spies who stoked the war, her weavers who encoded the messages, and her agents who smuggled in forged maps. The Chinese warlord, known in the West as General Shu, is no such man. He is, in truth, a Persian-born mercenary, raised in the mountains of the Tian Shan, trained in Chinese warfare, and now playing a deeper game. His army, already pledged to Anahita, is camped just a day's ride from the meeting point, not to aid Rome, but to ambush it. The trap is set. When the Roman legionnaires arrive weeks later to rendezvous and strike Persia from behind, they are met not by allies, but by Persian banners flying Chinese standards. In a single night, 10,000 soldiers vanish into the desert, betrayed by their own silk-sealed alliance. And Tiberius? He is captured, not killed. He is marched through Persian cities as proof of Rome's foolish ambition, a living warning. But there's one more betrayal left to unfold. Among the loot recovered from the Roman campaign is a scroll detailing a potential Eastern sea route, a way to bypass the Silk Road entirely. Furious, Anahita orders its destruction, but a copy survives. It reaches a sailor's hands in a southern port. He reads the broken characters aloud, barely understanding them. He whispers to himself, "If the land is treacherous, the sea will serve." It surfaces in a market in Kashgar, sold by a blind boy who claims it was found in a cave sealed since before the empires. Unrolled across the dusty floor is a map unlike anything known to man. It shows the entire Silk Road, every oasis, every hidden pass, every seaport from Luoyang to Rome, rendered with impossible accuracy. Some cities on the map have yet to be built. Others were buried by sand centuries ago. Rivers are drawn in places where deserts now lie. Trade routes once thought disconnected are perfectly aligned. At the bottom, a single line of script. He who sees the thread beyond time weaves destiny. The map is purchased in secret by a scholar of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. He spends weeks examining its ink, carbon dating places it 600 years too early. The parchment is older than the Han dynasty. It shouldn't exist. He sends word to Samarkand, seeking more information, but the courier never arrives. Instead, the scholar is visited in the dead of night by a hooded monk. The stranger speaks perfect Greek, Arabic, Sanskrit, and Mandarin. He wears a robe stitched with forgotten runes and carries an identical map. Only his version glows faintly in moonlight. The map isn't from the past, the monk says. It's from a future that never happened. Flashback. Decades earlier, during a brutal storm in the Himalayas, a Chinese monk named Lianzhou vanishes while attempting to reach a hidden monastery said to lie outside the known world. When he returns months later, his eyes are glassy, his voice distant, and his scrolls full of cities no one's heard of. He claims to have walked through a fold in the road, a place where time bent, and he glimpsed an empire that could rise only if the right paths were followed. He called this vision the silk thread of destiny. His peers called him mad. He was expelled from every monastery in the region. But over time, tales began to spread. Lianzhou had left maps behind, maps that predicted Mongol conquest before they happened, the rise of Baghdad before its walls were laid, even the plague routes of a future still decades away. Now his name is spoken in secret. The Tang dynasty is crumbling. Internally divided, bled dry by warlords and corruption, the once glorious empire that brought poetry and porcelain to the world now stands on the edge of collapse. In the imperial court of Chang'an, silks still shimmer, rituals are still performed, but behind the opulence lies a desperate silence. The coffers are empty. Grain reserves vanish into bandit hands. Entire provinces whisper of secession. Enter Minister Zhao Wen, the last true strategist of the old order. He proposes something unthinkable, reopening the slave trade along the Silk Road. Officially outlawed decades prior, it would now be quietly tolerated, then institutionalized under coded contracts. Labor levies, debt transit, indentured caravans. At first, the emperor resists, but when 3 major uprisings erupt in the west and the Mongol border lords refuse to pay tribute, the decision is made. A signature, a seal, and with it, the empire sells its soul. The road becomes darker overnight. Human caravans move under the cover of night, hidden beneath spice shipments and silk bundles. Brokers in Samarkand and Merv grow fat off misery. Cities that once sang with commerce now echo with chains and silence. But among one of these shipments is a child. No ordinary captive, a boy with storm-colored eyes, quiet yet commanding, marked with tattoos that match the royal sigil of the long-vanished Kushan Empire, thought to have been erased centuries ago. His name, Rajavarma. He speaks little, but watches everything. Guards who beat him fall mysteriously ill. Merchants who try to sell him vanish on the road, and in each town he passes, whispers begin. The golden heir walks again. Word of the child reaches Anahita in Samarkand. She recognizes the tattoos instantly, not just a relic of a lost empire, but of a prophecy her scholars had long buried. One that foretold a slave king who would unite the broken empires of the East and West under a new banner. She orders the boy intercepted. But when her riders reach the caravan, it is empty. Horses trampled, guards dead, no signs of struggle. Only a single silk cloth left behind. That was embroidered with the mark of the cult. They took him. But why? Meanwhile, in Baghdad, a scholar matching the monk from the time map chapter begins telling a story in secret gatherings of a boy sold like an object who would one day sit on a throne where East meets West. A throne of both memory and myth. And across the steppes, warbands begin uniting, bound not by blood or tribe, but by symbols scrawled on silk, bearing the child's name. The Silk Road, once pulsing with the lifeblood of empires, is now bleeding. It starts subtly. A merchant from Tabriz coughs blood in a tavern in Aleppo. A silk weaver's children in Constantinople vanish overnight after neighbors fall ill. In Samarkand, a corpse is found slumped over a spice crate, skin blackened, eyes open. The Black Death has arrived, and it spreads with unnatural speed. From Genoese ships to desert caravans, the disease leaps ahead of logic. Cities untouched by any known route fall within days, while others on major trade lines remain mysteriously spared. Something is wrong. In secret chambers of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, a pattern emerges. Every outbreak corresponds to a shipment of black silk, a rare luxurious fabric said to be dyed with ashes of fallen kings. Scholars track it back to a single weaver in Bukhara, but when they arrive, the village is empty, its buildings burned, and a symbol carved into the well, a burning wheel wrapped in thorns, the mark of the cult. Anahita, now realizing she's lost control of the network she once ruled, summons her remaining allies. But some of her generals begin deserting her. Others fall ill. The disease is not just killing the weak, it's targeting power. Flashback. The Mongol tomb that was opened held not treasure, but a strain of plague, and something even more terrifying, a manuscript in multiple languages, describing a ritual to reseed the world. The cult's name is finally revealed, the Riders of the Fifth Wind. Their belief that the world must pass through 4 ages of empire, followed by a purifying storm, the fifth wind, that will erase borders, melt crowns, and let the threadless, those with no past or nation, inherit the earth. And they have found their storm. They are no longer hiding. They ride with the caravans now, men in black robes leading camels with caged rats, plague dust sealed in oilcloths and silk dyed in human ash. They call themselves the Deliverers. They greet border guards with gifts, then leave behind rotting towns. The Silk Road is dying, not with fire and battle, but with silence. The cities are emptied, the caravans halted, the maps fade. Great trading hubs like Merv, Nishapur, and Ctesiphon become ghost towns. The plague spares no one, not kings, not monks, not merchants. But some knew this would happen. Deep beneath the sands of the Karakum Desert, Anahita uncovers a hidden sanctuary, a mirror vault built during the height of the Kushan Empire. Inside are scrolls sealed in jade, untouched by time, describing the Silk Road not as a path of trade, but as a living mechanism, a nervous system of empires, a neural web for the earth. Each node, Samarkand, Chang'an, Antioch, was not random but chosen, aligned with stars, built on energy lines only a few secret societies understood. The Riders of the Fifth Wind were not just trying to spread plague. They were trying to sever the neural link, to erase memory itself, because the road was never just a corridor, it was a memory bank, and it was alive. Twist. The black silk shipments weren't carrying disease alone. They carried coded data, woven in ancient binary, strands of knowledge older than any known civilization. The disease was a smokescreen. The cult's true aim? To bury a technology hidden in tradition, to unweave history itself. Rajavarma, the boy king, now a teenager cloaked in golden shadow, walks through the ruins of Palmyra. Behind him, armies rise, not with flags, but with silk strips tied around their arms. Each carries a fragment of a language no longer spoken, but somehow understood. He speaks from the ruins. The road did not vanish. You just stopped seeing it. In Venice, black ships arrive. But instead of plague, the ports receive blank scrolls, pages of silk that reveal text only in moonlight. Warnings, blueprints, prophecies. The riders are gone, or perhaps they've evolved. Their symbol, a burning wheel, is found etched in a stock exchange in Florence, on the robe of a scholar in Paris, even sewn into the lining of a merchant's coat on Wall Street centuries later.